Fly, Eagles, fly on the road to victory. Fight, 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 Eagles, fight. Score a touchdown, 1, 2, 1, 2. Hit 'em low, hit 'em high, and watch our Eagles fly. Fly, Eagles, fly on the road to victory. Eagles, Eagles. Of course, I am now a two-time defending Super Bowl champion as my Philadelphia Eagles have won Super Bowl 59. The parade took place this past Friday on Broad Street in Philadelphia, which means it is time, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, in collaboration with the one, the only Voltage Live. My social media links are in the description below. Today, I am going to be going through the entire 2024 NFL season. I'm going to give you a quick recap, a look back, if you will, on my predictions, as well as we're going to recap how I did in the money line, my best bets on the year, and how I did in my over-under betting. For those of you that are regular listeners of the Brandon's World podcast, you guys know that during the NFL season, every Tuesday, I would come on here and I would recap all 16 or 14 if there were bye weeks or how many games there were on the season. I would do our NFL recap. Then on Thursdays, I would give you what I would call my money line predictions, which is straight up no spread predictions for all the games on the NFL calendar. And then I would pick 5 games where I would bet the spread. I put $5 on it every single week. If you guys don't know that, and I did hit twice this year, which is the most we've ever hit in the history of Brandon's World. However, with that said, well, we had more 5 for 5 weeks. We also had more 2 for 5 weeks. So it was really hit or miss. Really, in the beginning of the year, I struggled betting. If you guys remember, early in the year, it was a historic rate for underdogs covering and defensive head coaches ruining the day of offensive head coaches for the first 2 to 3 weeks of the season. If you guys don't know this, I am traditionally not a underdog better. If you listen to my best bets, you know that there are even some weeks where I don't take any underdogs. There was one week this year where again underdogs were covering so much. I tried to give in. I laid like 3 underdogs and I missed all of them. Typically, I try to give, the underdogs I do like are not necessarily the ones to win games, but the ones where they just feel like they're getting too many points. I tend to hit mostly on those. So, but I did recover late in the year. So, anyway, off with my soliloquy. We finished the year in MoneyLine Picks straight up. We went 198 and 89. Again, they're just picking every single game on the NFL calendar from week one, opening night of Ravens Chiefs, all the way to the Super Bowl Chiefs Eagles. The 198 and 89 comes out to equivalent of 69%, which I've always said you want to be somewhere between 65 and 70% to have a really good year in the money line. So I will take that. Now, with best bets, as I try, obviously I do 5 games a week. So ideally for me, I try to hit 60% of the season. 3 for 5 every single week, give you a winning week every single week. Well, this year, it took time. It took great effort for me in the playoffs when it came to betting these games. But I ended up finishing 61 out of 102 in my best bets for the year, which is exactly right at 60%. Compare that to last year. So last year in the money line, we were 67%, again, compared to 69% this year. So an increase of 2%. In best bets, though, I was 66% last year. I was hitting on an historic rate in 2023 compared to 60%. So again, a little bit of a letdown, but I'm still happy with where we landed. Now, before I get into the recap of the teams and sort of my thoughts in the offseason and things like that, what I'm going to be doing is I have went through, and this year, if you guys know, when I made my 2024 NFL predictions, I picked a handful, about 7 or 8 teams to bet their over/under win total on the season. And these are the teams I bet. I bet the under with the New England Patriots. I had bet the over on the Denver Broncos, who were listed at 5.5. I had bet the over on the Houston Texans at 9.5. I had bet the under on the Tennessee Titans at 6.5. I had bet the over on the Washington Commanders at 6.5, the under on the Dallas Cowboys at 10.5, the under on the New York Giants at 6.5. In the NFC West, I did not make a bet. In the NFC North, I did not make a bet. And in the NFC South, I bet the over on the Atlanta Falcons of 9.5, and I bet the under on the New Orleans Saints at 7.5. So again, AFC, I bet the under of on New England. It hit. I bet the over on the Denver Broncos. It hit. I bet the I bet the over on the Houston Texans. That hit. I bet the under on the Tennessee Titans. That hit. In the NFC, I bet the over on the Commanders. That hit. I bet the under on the Cowboys and Giants. Both of those hit. I bet the under on the Saints. That hit. My only miss in NFL over/under betting on the year was I had Atlanta over 9.5, and it was looking really good, folks, until Kirk Cousins obviously regressed at the end of the season, looked like he lost all his strength in his arm. Michael Penix came in, and believe it or not, if Atlanta would have beat Washington in that Week 17 game where Washington went to overtime, that would have hit as well. So this year, I was very good, obviously, at betting over-unders. It was mostly betting off team projection, what their coach was, do they have a quarterback, what their division looks like, off-season moves, all of that. I think we all kind of knew New England was going to finish last in the AFC East. Believe it or not, they were right there with the New York Jets. I think we all kind of knew, the Tennessee Titans were going to be a bad football team. We all had great expectations for CJ Stroud, on Diggs, Nico Collins, and the Houston Texans. And while they barely hit that over on the last week of the season by defeating the Tennessee Titans, their division was still relatively weak. The division I nailed the most was my own division, the NFC East, right? I hit the over on the Commanders. I hit the under on the Cowboys and the Giants. I really felt like Dan Quinn, Jane Daniels, the new ownership in Washington, the additions of Bobby Wagner, the additions of Austin Eckler, the addition of Biotis, the center, the addition of Zach Ertz at tight end. I really like the direction Washington was going. Dallas did not spend a penny in the offseason, and I said they were a Dak Prescott, CeeDee Lamb dependent offense. And then the New York Giants had arguably next to the Tennessee Titans and the New Orleans Saints, for that matter, the worst rosters in the league. Atlanta was again, we all thought maybe Tampa Bay has a little bit of a pullback, which they did early. I mean, I did not know that Liam Cohen turned out to be a better offensive coordinator than Dave Canales, who, by the way, ended up turning around Bryce Young there at the end of the season. So that really took a look at the over-unders. Denver, to me, like they won 7 games the year prior with Russell Wilson. I thought Bo Nix was going to have a surprisingly underrated good year. Now, with the Chargers and the Chiefs in that division, I did not think Denver was going to be able to sneak into the playoffs, but I did not expect Cincinnati to have the worst defense, arguably, in the history of the National Football League either. And Bo Nix did play better even than I had particularly thought. But again, the over-under of 5.5 there for Denver, I thought was just way too low. So now we're gonna go here. We're gonna go division by division. I'm not gonna take a ton of time on this. It's not gonna be, an hour long show here today, but I'm just gonna give you my quick snapshot of what I thought of the AFC East, AFC West, AFC North, AFC South, NFC East, NFC West, NFC North, NFC South, sort of where I was right and where I was wrong. If you guys listen to the great Colin Cowherd, maybe the most popular sports talk radio show host in the country, every Monday at 1 p.m. Eastern, 12 p.m. Central, 10 a.m. Pacific, he does a segment called Where Colin Was Right, Where Colin Was Wrong, where he takes his opinions throughout the course of the week, if you will, and sort of dials it up and says, okay, this is where I was right, this is where I was wrong. We're gonna sort of do a little bit of that today with my NFL recap. But again, we're not gonna go in depth with all these teams. I don't want to make this an hour-long podcast, particularly because my voice is still not strong enough to talk for an hour straight. The AFC East, the bottom line is, listen, I overthought this division. Uh, New England, to me, I was really impressed, even though they were, what, a 4-win football team this year. Drake May showed promise that I did not know if he would show, particularly because they don't have any weapons on the outside. And now that they have Josh McDaniels back in the building and they have Mike Vrabel back in the building and Doug Marrone, who is not a very good head coach in Jacksonville, but he's a very respected offensive line coach around the league. New England, you could see if they invest resources, and by that I'm talking draft and free agency in the offense side of the ball, get Drake May some linemen, get Drake May some receivers. You have some toughness there with Mike Vrabel. New England has a foundation built for the foreseeable future. But in this division, I kind of nailed Miami. Listen, I said that they were going to be right there. I had them as a playoff team, but I just wasn't sure. I thought the talent was too good enough, but Tua Tagovailoa got hurt early in the year. We know the scary concussion he had week 2 against Buffalo. That sort of derailed their season. We know Tua has a ceiling. It seems like to me Mike McDaniel has a ceiling where he's a great offensive mind. He can outsmart you, he can outclever you. They can beat the bad teams. They can't beat the good teams. We'll see what the relationship is like with Tyreek Hill and the Dolphins moving forward. I thought the weirdest thing about Miami all season long was they just seemingly, not only did they not have a backup quarterback for Tua, but they could not get Jalen Waddle involved in the game. And, again, I overthought this division. I thought that Buffalo losing not only Stephon Diggs, but losing Gabe Davis, I thought that they, along with the defensive veteran pieces that they lost, I thought it was sort of going to be a reshuffle, retool year. I thought the New York Jets with a healthy Aaron Rodgers, led by Robert Saleh and that very good Jets defense, was going to turn it around. I thought this was the year that the Jets, they got Tyron Smith. They got Mike Williams. They have a healthy Breach Hall. They won 7 games the year before with Zach Wilson. Seemingly, Aaron Rodgers was going to do better than that. And then, some way, somehow, after the Week 3 win against the New England Patriots, where they went out and they became 2-1 on the year, after that, everything fell apart. They ended up firing Robert Saleh. Then they bring in Davante Adams. Joe Douglas, the general manager, is also let go there about by the time Thanksgiving hit. And I said that even though I really like the Jets' chances and I felt like this was their year to win the AFC East over Buffalo, I said the one thing that will derail them is the Hassan Reddick drama, which we knew that was cleared up once Robert Saleh was out of the building, but also the fact that Aaron Rodgers did not participate in voluntary and mandatory OTAs. The way Robert Saleh answered it, saying it was an unexcused absence, it was very strange. And so my biggest fear of the Jets, I didn't want to believe it, but it came true. And now we'll see Aaron Glenn is a obviously well-respected guy. What he did with the Lions defense, even though they got shredded by the Commanders, overall he rebuilt that club the last few years on the defensive side of the ball. and we'll see. They need a quarterback, obviously. They need a new voice, but there's a little bit of optimism in New York that Hope is not all totally lost. For Buffalo, I keep going back to this. And yes, Coleman, the rookie, stepped up, and they did trade for Amari Cooper, who did not have that much of an impact in the postseason. Mac Hollins made some big plays. The defense was better than I had thought going into the year. We know Sean McDermott can really coach, and as long as you have Joe Brady as offensive coordinator, as long as you have Josh Allen, a quarterback, they did stick to the run game with James Cook, which I wasn't sure that was going to be their game plan going into the year. It was. I thought Buffalo had one of their most successful regular seasons in the history of their franchise. I mean, they were the only team to knock off the Kansas City Chiefs this year in the regular season. But I go back to this for Buffalo, right? They made the AFC Championship game. They played Kansas City as well as they possibly could. They won the turnover battle 1-0 in that game, and they still cannot get over the hump. I know Buffalo is a bunch of young guys at wide receiver who seemingly will get better, and as long as you have Josh Allen, you're going to be competitive in games. But how long is it going to be till Buffalo keeps banging on the door against Kansas City? Will they ever get through, or will this team be demoralized forever because of them not being able to get over the hump of the Chiefs? In the AFC West, I all but nailed this division. Now, Kansas City, I had having a little bit of a struggling time in the regular season. Uh, I had them at 11-6, not 15-2. I thought it was going to be a lot like the regular season 2 years ago, and it really could have been. I mean, how many games could they have lost by one possession that they did not? Um, I said, Travis Kelce and co are going to want to shake it off and do something no other team in the 59-year history of the Super Bowl has done. And that is obviously win three straight. We knew about the Rashid Rice drama coming into the year of his potential suspension that did not come and pass, but they ended up missing him due to obviously the hit that Patrick Mahomes hit on his knee there in week 4. But this Chiefs team was not an explosive team. They were an efficient team. And I just do not know if they're going to be able to keep up that 15-2 pace a year from now. Again, I like Denver at 7 wins. So, the 10 wins and a playoff spot surprised me. They were better than I thought they were going to be. But I like Sean Payton and Bo Nix, and I like the future of that franchise. The Chargers were exactly who I thought they would be under Jim Harbaugh, 9, 10, 11 wins, running the football. I was not that concerned with the fact that they let go not only Mike Williams, but also Keenan Allen, because I thought J.K. Dobbins, Gus Edwards, you add Greg Roman, the former Ravens OC, who worked with Jim Harbaugh as well in San Francisco. So I really liked what the Chargers have done, right? Jesse Minter in that defense, he essentially took the same personnel Brandon Staley had and made them one of the best defenses in the NFL this year. They drafted Joe Alt to protect Justin Herbert, so now they have their anchors on the left and right side. They also have Zion Johnson, who's been a pretty good guard for them that Telesco in the last administration picked up in the draft. So for me now, the Chargers, we'll see. Do they try to get younger at defensive end? Do they decide to move on from a Khalil Mack or a Joey Bosa? And to me, it's like outside of Len McConkey, they need one more big time playmaker. The kid was great in Georgia. Reminds me a lot of a Cole Beasley, a Shakir for Buffalo in the slot, but I think they do need one more big time playmaker and maybe a more reliable tight end than Will Disley. And then the Raiders. I said it was a big mistake bringing on Antonio Pierce. I did not care that at the time Devontae Adams as well as Max Crosby labeled him for the job. They lamented him. I think a lot of the Raiders felt like it was a big mistake to not give Rich Bisaccia, the interim head coach who did so well for them after John Gruden, the job a couple years ago. But I said there's a difference between an interim head coach and a real head coach. And when you're in a division with Sean Payton, Jim Harbaugh, Andy Reid, Bo Nix, Justin Herbert, Patrick Mahomes. That's why the Raiders this offseason went out. They grabbed Pete Carroll. They grabbed Chip Kelly. And they need to figure out what they're going to do at that offensive spot with Aiden O'Connell right now at quarterback. They have Gardner Minshew in the mix there. Like, even though they got rid of Devontae Adams, we like Jacoby Myers. We like Brock Bowers. We like Michael Mayer, the second tight end they have. They obviously need some work at the offensive line spot, and they need maybe a couple more fillers here, running back or so. But the work on this team is they need to get a quarterback to compete with the rest of their division. I already talked about the Cincinnati Bengals and how I was kind of right on them. I was kind of wrong. Listen, I had them at 12-5. Their offense was as explosive as I predicted them to be, and if their defense didn't give up 45 points instead of 9-8, they could have been 12-5. So, and as much as I love Lamar Jackson and he's great, as long as Lamar Jackson is there and Derrick Henry is there, etc., the Ravens are going to win games. But I'm sorry, Joe Burrow has made a Super Bowl. Joe Burrow has beaten Patrick Mahomes in the AFC Championship game, and he did it in Kansas City. Lamar Jackson has not done that, and I know Lamar has had more success against Joe Burrow and crew head to head, but I still will take Joe Burrow as a better quarterback over Baltimore. For both of those teams, I have the same questions of just like the Buffalo Bills, when will they get over the top? Cincinnati has a new defensive coordinator. We'll see. The interesting thing about the Bengals is obviously going to be the T. Higgins situation. And this is what I will say about that. Buffalo, Baltimore, Cincinnati, they all complain about, they don't have enough money. They don't have the personnel to match up with the Chiefs and Patrick Mahomes. My Philadelphia Eagles, the reigning, defending, undisputed two-time Super Bowl champions, are paying Jalen Hurts, Devontae Smith, A.J. Brown, Saquon Barkley, Landon Dickerson, Cam Jurgens, Jordan Mailata, Lane Johnson. Now they have hit with a lot of young players on the defense side of the ball. Jalen Carter, Nolan Smith, Quinyon Mitchell, Cooper DeJean, Jacoby Dean, Zach Bond, etc. So Philly's resources are going to the offense side of the ball, if you will, and money. The defensive resources are coming in the draft. excuse, excuse me. The NFL is not like Major League Baseball. The NFL has a salary cap. Everybody plays under the same rules. Cleveland and Buffalo play under the same rules as Boston and New York. So my answer here is Cincinnati is, oh, we can't afford T. Higgins. Yes, you can. If Philadelphia can do it, you can too. Now, I realize you need to fix a lot on your defense side of the ball, including you need another pass rusher outside of Trey Henderson. You need to completely redo your linebacker room. You need to completely redo your secondary. But you know what I say to Cincinnati? Too bad. Fix it. Philadelphia's defense was a mess a year ago. They fixed it in one offseason while paying two wide receivers. They can too. Joe Burrow has came out and said he would like T. Higgins and Jamar Chase both back. We know Jamar Chase is due for a big contract extension. It's a mess in Cincinnati because of cheap ownership. But if the Bengals want to keep Joe Burrow happy for the rest of his career and stay in not only AFC North, but Super Bowl contention, that's what they need to do. I may have not been more right on a team this year than the Pittsburgh Steelers. I said they were going to start off real hot, 6-2, 7-3. They were going to crumble down the stretch. That's exactly what happened. Listen, I think the Steelers are getting very old very quickly. They are the franchise that is trying to hang on to past glory. Ever since they lost, what was it, the AFC Championship game? Excuse me. Leading in at Super Bowl 49 against the New England Patriots. Maybe it was Super Bowl, I don't remember. Maybe it was 51 against the New England Patriots. The Atlanta one. They haven't felt the same, right? The Big Ben era is over. The Antonio Brown, Le'Veon Bell era is over. Kenny Pickett was obviously not the answer. He is now backing up Jalen Hurts in Philadelphia. Russell Wilson, regardless of what people say, was not the answer either. Arthur Smith was not the answer offensive coordinator. I don't even think Justin Fields was the answer at quarterback. Like this Steelers team was a run the ball on first down, throw a go ball to George Pickens, and pray it works and hope that our defense will stop them. And by the end of the year, when they played good teams, they played the Ravens, they played the Chiefs, they played Philly, even Cincinnati beat them. Their last win of the season came week 14 against a Browns team who beat them in the snow 2 weeks earlier on a Thursday night. That should not be the Steelers standard going forward for a golden standard franchise. I know that we keep our coaches and we've only had three coaches in the history of our franchise and yada, yada, yada. I think it's time for a new voice. Guys like Cam Hayward, TJ Watt on that side of the ball are only getting older, and they don't have a solution right now at the offense side of the ball. They need a completely repivot. They need a smart offensive mind who will get them another receiver. I think they're probably going to let Najee Harris go. Can Jalen Warren take over the duties for the running back position? They've invested some nice resources in their offensive line. Their offensive line's not bad, but when your strategy with Russell Wilson is essentially play to not lose the game, the Steelers standard is now we have a 500 or over 500 record every year of our franchise. And to me, it's not good enough. And I hate to say it, folks, but I said going into the year that Cleveland could have been a disaster. And I was right on it. I didn't want to pick it. I thought Deshaun Watson may have a better year than what he had 2 years ago, but I didn't think it was going to be great. And starting week one in the first freaking series of the entire year against the Dallas Cowboys, who again, going into the year, I said they were not going to have a good year. I said the Browns are in trouble. I said, 1-16 was on the board after I watched week one. And they won 3 games all year. Deshaun Watson towards Achilles, blah, 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 blah. Listen, again, this is what I've been telling Browns fans all offseason. The Washington Commanders rebuilt their team. They were a mess. Dan Snyder was owner. They had no quarterback. They had no coach. They made the NFC Championship game this season. You have a coach, you have a quarterback, you have an offensive line. You can win a lot of football games. And Jim Schwartz is still a very good defensive coordinator, I believe. I believe Kevin Stefanski can be a potentially good head coach. I would move on from Myles Garrett if I was Cleveland. I would go out. I would draft a dual Carter, who I think could be the next Myles Garrett at a cheaper price. You get another first round pick. Excuse me. Maybe you bring back in a Jameis Winston, something like that. And I think you just roll with the bridge quarterback for this year. You start building pieces around, you start drafting offensive linemen, you build for the trenches, and then you can insert that quarterback because right now, well, this Browns roster is good. Um, to me, it's not nearly as good to compete with the likes of Cincinnati, Baltimore in your own division, a Kansas City, a Buffalo, even a Chargers, a Denver. If the Jets get their act together, if New England gets their act together, who knows? Um, I think the Browns are heading towards a complete rebuild. So I said going into the year, listen, everybody said that CJ Stroud had one of the best rookie seasons of all time, and they were right. But sometimes in the NFL, we don't see linear progression, right? Sometimes in the NFL, we see guys have a great year and then they bounce back to the mean the next year. I sort of felt that way about Houston, though I did love the additions of Joe Mixon and Stephon Diggs on the offense side of the ball and their defense, led by Al Shire and Petrie and Derek Stingley and Will Anderson. They were not the issue. For whatever reason, Bobby Slowick and CJ Stroud seemingly did not get along. The offense, as we kept saying, even before the Stephon Diggs and Nico Collins and Tank Dell injuries, the offense was very Joe Mixon dependent. And so I'm interested to see if Houston can bounce back from what I would actually consider, even though they lost to the same point this year that they did last year, I would actually consider this year a disappointment because Houston Texans fans had um higher expectations. I would say two of the most disappointing teams in the entire AFC, Jacksonville and Indianapolis. For whatever reason, for the life of me, I do not understand what went wrong for both of these franchises. Doug Peterson was a Super Bowl winning head coach in Philadelphia in his 5 years in Philly there. He got Philly to the playoffs 3 out of 5 years, including those 3 straight years. He won some years with lesser talent. And that first year with Trevor Lawrence in Jacksonville, they won a playoff game. And then the next year they started off 8-3 or 9-3. They were in position to be the number one seed in the AFC. And then it just all fell apart. And now you got Liam Cohen coming over from Tampa Bay. We'll see if he can resurrect Trevor Lawrence, who was completely lost. Same way for Shane Steichen, who came over from Philadelphia after Super Bowl 57, drafted Anthony Richardson. They knew he was going to be a project, but without Gardner Minshew in the building this year, and with Anthony Richardson, who did not start and finish a full game a year ago, there was a lot of expectations, and he made one of the throws of the year early on week one against the Houston Texans, where he was falling back and put the ball in the air to Downs, I believe, 70 yards down the sideline for a touchdown. That was Anthony Richardson's entire season, basically. Anthony Richardson had multiple games with under 50% completion percentage. And that concerns me in today's NFL, where passing the football is a lot easier, where you should be more successful with an offensive head coach. The Indianapolis Colts have one of the best offensive lines in football. Jonathan Taylor is one of the best running backs in football. And yet, Anthony Richardson could throw a ball from my house all the way down the street and be accurate, but he couldn't hit a pass from me to you in the camera. It's one of the strangest quarterback dynamics I know, and to be honest with you, I think Anthony Richardson has one more shot. I like the Colts roster. I like Steichen as head coach. I like Chris Ballard as general manager. They have some pieces on the defense side of the ball as well, with DeForest Buckner at the defensive line and Quiddy Pay at the defensive line. Um, Kenny Moore in the secondary. But this team will go as far as Anthony Richardson takes them. And they had some weird performances this year. They had some games where, they looked like they could put up, 30, 40 points a game, and others where they could barely move the ball. And the Tennessee Titans, I know it as well. Again, I said, I don't know how good of a coach Brian Callahan's going to be. I knew their offensive line was going to be better with Bill Callahan, his father, one of the best offensive line coaches in the history of the sport, coming along to coach that position. But I said they had Calvin Ridley, they had Tyler Boyd, they bring in Tony Pollard from Dallas. Like their receivers were nice, and they had DeAndre Hopkins early in the year too, obviously, but their quarterback was Will Levis. And their defense was a complete rebuild, and Will Levis was going to lose them a lot of games. And that's exactly what happened. Will Levis, basically, I mean, if he was starting for the Titans, if it was Mason Rudolph, the Titans were confident they could move the ball, they could put up points. If Will Levis was starting this year for the Tennessee Titans, how many times did I say for now the team with the number one pick in the NFL draft bet against Will Levis? I think it's clear what the Titans need to do. I think they need to take a quarterback. I don't know who that quarterback's going to be. It sounds like it's going to be Cam Ward. And to me, it sounds like the Tennessee Titans are giving him the face of the franchise where he will start from week one this year. Okay, I'm not going to spend a ton of time on the NFC East. I already alluded to it. You guys already know how I feel about my Philadelphia Eagles. You guys know already my thoughts on the Commanders. Dallas, the Giants, I obviously thought were terrible. Like, I've gone over all four of those teams in depth. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. San Francisco, they dealt with injuries. I did not think that they were going to have this bad of a Super Bowl hangover, but the injuries was really the story for this team. The Rams, were kind of the same team I thought that they were going to be. Get off to a slow start. Now they dealt with injuries early in the year. When it came to Cooper Cup, when it came to Puka Nakua, they got hot late in the year. They were the best team that played against Philadelphia in the postseason. They had a chance to win that game in the snow. But oddly, it feels like the Rams, who, Braden Fish, Jaron Verse, they got those two defensive linemen who are going to be the anchors of their new defense. Now that Aaron Donald is not there, they have told Cooper Cup that he's going to get traded. It sounds like Matthew Stafford may be on the trade block, maybe a quarterback needy team. The Giants, Cleveland, maybe even Minnesota, if they move off Sam Darnold, could be the spot. The Rams are going to look to get cheaper and younger. And it's sort of a weird move because you sort of felt like even, 2 years ago, coming off the Super Bowl, they got back to what they were good at. They had Stafford, they had Kyron Williams, they had the two good receivers. They have spent a lot of resources, a lot like the Philadelphia Eagles, on drafting defensive linemen and drafting the secondary, and it has worked. But overall, it just feels like I don't know, like they're in a weird spot right now where you don't know what their future is going to look like. Arizona, I kind of nailed. I had them at an 8-9 record. Kyler Murray, I said he was going to have good weeks. He was going to have bad weeks. I thought Marvin Harrison was going to have more of an impact on the offense than he did. Jonathan Gannon seems like he's a good coach, not a great coach, but for Kyler Murray as the number one pick in the 2019 NFL draft, it does feel like a little bit like he's set below expectations. Seattle. I'll be honest, I never got a grip on this team all year long. I had them at 7 wins. They finished at 10. They have a really good roster. We know that Tyler Lockett, Jackson Smith and Jigba, DK Metcalf at all three of the wide receiver spots. I did not know how good of a defensive coach as a head coach Mike McDonald would be, and at times that Seattle defense got shredded. But they got better later in the year. Early on, I kind of felt like they were beating bad teams, but then they ended up knocking off San Francisco in San Francisco. Again, they beat that team this year, but they ended up losing to the New York Giants. So like they had a very strange year. But as I've been saying, for Seattle, I've always felt like their answer is they have to upgrade from Geno Smith at quarterback. The NFC North, the couple things I did get right about this division was I did say going into the year this was going to be the toughest division in football, and it proved to be true. Obviously, three teams going out of the playoffs. We know the Vikings Lions Week 18 game was the difference between the number one seed and the number five seed. For the Detroit Lions, obviously the injuries hurt them. I thought the Aiden Hutchinson injury really showed up, even though they got Zadarius Smith from Cleveland at the trade deadline. I thought the Aiden Hutchinson injury really showed up in that Commanders game. They did not get any pressure whatsoever on Jaden Daniels in that postseason game. Jared Goff, unfortunately for them, after he had such a great year, turned back into the Jared Goff that we saw in Los Angeles, which was he's a very good quarterback, but at times when you get pressure on him, when he's in a big spot, he does not often deliver. And I think the Lions are all like my Philadelphia Eagles, who, lost Shane Steichen and Jonathan Gannon after losing Super Bowl 57, and it took them a year to reboot. I think losing Aaron Glenn on the defense side of the ball and losing Ben Johnson. I think you could have lost either one of them. You can't lose both. And so I am fearful for Detroit that all this losing, they lost the NFC Championship game the year before to San Francisco. They had their best regular season in franchise history. They go 15-2. I'm just afraid it's going to be a lot on them. And I think there is going to be a little bit of pushback from Detroit. Now, Minnesota, I did not think their defense was going to be as good. I thought they'd win 7 games because I thought Sam Darnold was going to actually have a really good year with Justin Jefferson, Aaron Jones, Jordan Addison, TJ Hawkinson as his weapons. But I did not know that Brian Flores was going to turn a defense with not a lot of phases on it into one of the best regular season defenses in the league. Now, Minnesota obviously is a big decision to make. Sam Darnold did turn back into a pumpkin late in the year. I think I would go with the young kid, JJ McCarthy, who I think with Kevin O'Connell is going to show a lot of process, and we'll see where Sam Darnold lands on the market. For Green Bay, they had a better regular season than I thought they would have. They ended up winning 10 games. They made the postseason, which, to be honest with you, I did not think that they would. Um, Jordan Love did what Jordan Love has done the past couple of seasons, which is win a lot of regular season games, struggle early in the year, get hot late in the year. This year, he had to deal with some injuries. Excuse me, even going into the postseason, he had to deal with some injuries. But Green Bay, even though Josh Jacobs was way more successful in Green Bay than I thought he would be, I really did not understand the move from Jacobs to Aaron Jones, but that's why I'm not an NFL general manager. They just sort of feel like they have a good secondary. Without Jair Alexander, they don't feel like they have anybody special. I like McKinley on the back end. He doesn't feel like a very special safety. Defensive lineman, I like Devontae Wyatt. I like the kid they drafted out of Iowa State. I like Campbell, but again, nobody feels special. Receivers, obviously, I like Reed. I like Watson. I like Dobbs. Nobody feels like a game-changing special player. Jordan Love at times is a lot like Brett Favre. He has some throws he makes where he's like Brett Favre. He has other throws he makes where he's run off his back foot, and it reminds me a lot of Aaron Rodgers. I would like to see him play more of a consistent season from start to finish. And then the Bears. You guys know my thoughts on the Bears. I was very high on them coming into the season. Caleb Williams, I thought, was going to become the first quarterback that they ever had in the history of the freaking franchise to have 4,000 yards and for over 30 touchdowns in a season. I really like the fact that they went and they drafted another wide receiver in Roma Dunze to go along with the trade acquisition of Keenan Allen and DJ Moore. I thought Matt Eberflus was going to be able to coach the heck out of the defense, and yet Matt Eberflus, excuse me, Matt Eberflus did not know how to manage a clock. And that was the biggest story for the Chicago Bears this season. We all know about the Thanksgiving disaster, and now the offensive coordinator for the Lions, who was on the sideline for Chicago in that game, is now going to be tasked with rebuilding the offensive line essentially and morphing the Detroit offense that he had to fit in with Chicago and Caleb Williams. And maybe it's a slow start. I think they're going to get better next year as the year goes on. In the NFC South, listen, I already alluded to it that Liam Cohen was better than I thought he would be for Baker Mayfield, who I thought would regress a little bit without Dave Canales. Let's see if Tampa Bay can make it 3 for 3 in replacing Baker Mayfield's offensive coordinators, who has gone through about as many coordinators this season as Jalen Hurts has done for his career. Listen, Atlanta, again, I already alluded to it. Kirk Cousins was very hit and miss. Raheem Morris was not very good at clock management. Their defense, despite Raheem Morris being a defensive head coach, was not very good. Despite the addition of Matthew Judon on the defensive line, they still could not get a lot of pass rush. Michael Penix did show promise, and I think that Zach Robinson, their offensive coordinator, you get Penix year two in the system. Year one as a starter. Maybe they go out, they make some defensive additions. I think Atlanta could be better next year, but certainly in a weak division here, the clock is ticking. Carolina, I think, has some real reason to be optimistic. I think Xavier will they're going to work with him in the offseason. He could be a potential number one receiver. He has an A.J. Brown-esque body. He just got to work on catching more with his hands. You like the running back room that they have, led by Chuba Hubbard. You like the investment that they have made in the offensive line. Um, Bryce Young played sensational the last half of the season. He arguably should have beat Tampa Bay, Kansas City, and Philadelphia in back-to-back-to-back weeks. I think there is reason for optimism here for the Panthers. They started off the season so bad. Bryce Young got benched. Andy Dalton had to come in. Bryce Young looked like he couldn't belong in the freaking fan-controlled football league. Yet again, by the end of the year, I could make an argument Bryce Young looked like a potential franchise quarterback. Carolina needs to build on that. They need to get him more offensive linemen. They need to get him more tight ends. They need to invest more other than Derek Brown and an old Jadeveon Clowney, who I would guess would not be back on the defensive side of the football. But in my opinion, all hope is not lost in Carolina. Now, I think new Saints head coach Kellen Moore. I don't care if it's Derek Carr quarterback. I don't care if it's Spencer Rattler. I know they have Chris Olave. To me, Alvin Kamara is getting old as a back, though he had a very good year last year. If you remember, Quinn Kubiak, who's now the offensive coordinator in Seattle, is calling plays for New Orleans. The first two, plays of the year, Raheed Shaheed's going off. New Orleans blows out Dallas. They blow out Carolina. Everybody gets excited for that team, and maybe they're the surprise team of the week, and then what? They win 3 games the rest of the year. Dennis Allen is canned. They are a weird franchise with a lot of old aging players, including Chase Young, including Cam Jordan. They get rid of Marshawn Lattimore at the trade deadline. And again, I said it. If I was Kellen Moore, I wanted him to stay in Philadelphia, but I understand why he didn't. I think he would have got a better job next year, but there are only one of 32 NFL head coaching jobs out there. I just think this New Orleans Saints team is a massive rebuild. So with that overall, obviously I had a great year. My Philadelphia Eagles are 2024 Super Bowl 59, two-time defending Super Bowl champions. We had a great year picking games in the money line. We had a good year picking best bets. We bounced back. Overall, I feel like I was more right on my predictions than wrong. I think my biggest misses were the AFC East and overall NFC North. I had higher expectations for the Chicago Bears and the New York Jets that sort of fell flat. I was proud, though, of some of my predictions, especially the entire NFC East. I nailed the Commanders. I nailed Philly. I nailed the Giants. I nailed Dallas. I nailed Pittsburgh. Cincinnati was a weird one to me where it's like I got their offense right. Who knows about their defense? I liked my predictions on the Chargers, the Raiders, the Broncos. Chiefs were better than I thought they would be record wise, but obviously we all know what Kansas City brings to the table. So overall, the NFL to me is getting easier to predict because the best quarterbacks are winning every single division. We got to keep that in mind going into next year. But overall, I thought I was more right this year in the NFL than I was wrong. And that concludes my 2024 NFL recap. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Like that clip from the Brands World podcast? If so, make sure you go down there and hit that subscribe button. While you're down there hitting the subscribe button, make sure to also hit the notification bell so you never miss another upload. And make sure you check out all the other clips from the Brands World podcast right here on YouTube.